When was it in your career academically? Because I'm sure that you noticed the posts or neo-Marxism and all that throughout your academic career. What was it one big thing, one big trend you noticed that got you really into combating this, or has it just been a long, slow burn until it just reached a breaking point of I have to speak up?
Well, I've been unhappy about the lack of criticism of Marxist doctrine for a long time, because I steeped myself in the literature, especially in the literature regarding the horrors of the Soviet Union, which are manifold and deep. And so that's always been, well, I mean, I think it's not the same thing, but, you know, it's akin in some sense to being a Jew if no one knew anything about what happened with the Nazis. I mean, I'm not a Jew, and I don't have that right in some sense, you know what I mean? But the fact that what happened in the Soviet Union isn't memorized by everyone in high school is an absolute crime. Like, they figure 100 million people died in China, you know, because of the Cultural Revolution. 100 million. That's like as many people died in World War II.
Is that when Mao was having everyone shoot the birds?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, when his great.
That's what happens when you have one guy like just dreaming up his ideals and ideas for like what would make this gigantic place even better.
Why'd they shoot birds?
He thought the birds were eating his crops, and if you eliminate all the little field birds of any kind, then our productions will go so far up. But the birds were eating the insects that prey upon the crops. Massive famine. Tens of millions died.
Okay, so there's that always percolating in the back, you know, and I became a great enemy of ideology as a consequence of familiarizing myself with the literature on totalitarianism. And then the PC thing really peaked in the early 1990s. It peaked around 1993, and I was not happy about it at that point, but it receded. I think the economy improved so bloody dramatically that everybody just went out and, you know, had a life instead of pursuing this. But then it just came back with a vengeance like 4 years ago, and then it manifested itself in Canadian law. And this compelled speech thing, it's like, well, it made it personal for me. It's like, because there was now a legal requirement that I'm very careful with my language. I've watched myself talk now carefully since 1985. So I'm always watching myself talk, you know, to feel whether or not the words are making me solid or making me weak. And I'm not willing to have someone extend legislative fiat over the nature of my utterances. I would rather die. And I mean that seriously. I really mean that, because I can't mean it any more seriously than that. And I actually mean that. And I took great risks in the last year. I mean, I'm not complaining about that in the least, and it's worked out wonderfully. But I'm not allowing my language to be taken over by ideologues.
I think was there something that happened in '85 that changed the way that you thought about your speech?
Yes. What happened was, I went out to this maximum security prison, and I was taken out there by this very strange psychology professor that sort of took a shine to me. And he was a very creative person, and he was the prison psychologist, and he invited me to come out there a couple of times. And so I went out there, and I had a number of strange experiences out in the prison. One of them was I was in the prison gymnasium, which looked a lot like a high school gymnasium, surrounded by these guys that were like real monsters, you know, like this was a maximum security prison. The one of the guys I remember was completely tattooed, very muscular. He had like a scar running from here to here that was like this thick, you know, it's like someone split his chest with an axe. And when I was in the gymnasium, I was wearing this cape that I bought in Portugal, and these long boots that I bought. It was kind of a 1890s.
Prison clothes, yeah.
Yeah, prison clothes. And all these guys came around and started to offer to trade me their clothes for mine, you know, and the psychologist just skittered off somewhere and left me in the middle of it. And he probably did that. He had his own reasons. Like I said, he was an eccentric guy. And this little guy came up and said that the psychologist had asked him to accompany me somewhere, whatever. And so I went with him because he looked preferable to these monsters that were around me. And we went out into the yard through the doors, just like a high school, out through the double doors, out into the yard. And we got about 20, 30 yards away. And then the prison psychologist showed up at the door and motioned us back. I didn't think much of it. This guy was about 5'6" or something like that, kind of nondescript guy. And so the psychologist took me into his office and said that he had taken 2 policemen and made them dig their own graves and shot them in cold blood when they were begging for their lives because they had children. And so that really made me think, eh? That sort of thing makes you think. Because I thought, well, that's nondescript guys. Look what he did. And then about a week after that, I heard that another prisoner that I had met and a second one had taken a third prisoner who they thought was a rat, and they had taken a lead pipe and pulverized one of his legs with it. So just, literally pulverized it. At the same time, I was having these weird experiences. I was in class, and I would get this impulse to, jab my pen into the neck of the person in front of me. And, it wasn't a powerful impulse, but it was a dark impulse, And it's, I think people have impulses like that more often than
Oh, I think about tripping people in public constantly. Yeah.
Well,
that's not quite as pathological, but
no.
But anyway, so that was really disturbing me. Oh, and then I was thinking about all this, and one of the things I did was I was trying to understand how someone could do the trick with the pipe, because I thought I couldn't understand that. So I really thought about it. I meditated on it, I would say, probably for about 3 weeks. And I can really think about things with a fair degree of concentration. And I really thought about that obsession, I would say. And I thought about that obsessively for about 3 weeks. And what I realized was that, because I thought, how could I do that? That was the question. Not how could someone do that. I wanted to know, because that someone was a person, and I'm a person, and people can do such things. And so I tried to put myself into the mental state that would allow me to do that. And then what I realized was that I could do it, and that it would be easier than I thought. And that impulse, by the way, went away. So I thought that was pretty interesting too.
What was it that finally got you to that point of I could do that? Was it just,
imagining
ruminating on it for so long?
Imagining doing it, imagining the action, imagining finding the pipe, imagining visualizing it,
Was it visualizing the act, or was there any part where you tried to dream up or create a circumstance in which you would be angry or motivated to do so?
I wasn't doing that. I guess that was part and parcel of the background, but it was more narrative free. It was just
wow.
It was just the act.
Because that would be my path.
Yeah.
If you asked me to do that, I would say, oh, well, what if this person did X, Y, and Z to me or mine?
Yeah, right.
Then he's lucky I let him keep the leg, right? It's easy to get there.
No, I was thinking more of the torture routine, where there's no motivation for it, except
complete sadism. It's hard to get into that.
That's got to be a lot harder to convince yourself that you could do it. It's the same Nazi guard tower kind of thing.
That's what it was. And I was reading about that sort of thing,
Yeah.
So
true sadism disgusts me in a way that I have a hard time making that understanding true sadism, just the enjoyment of inflicting pain upon another. It really disgusts me in a way that's hard to...
Right. Well, believe me, I felt the same way.
That is the other to me. Yeah. Those people, those aren't people anymore by my definition. The people who have lost that ability, those are the people who need to be stepped on by snakes.
Right.
I'm a little different. I like Dr. Peterson, I feel like I could be that guy. But the reason I'm not is one thing we mentioned earlier about this whole, you are the author of your own life story, right? Are you going to be the villain in this story? You get to decide whether you're the heroic main character or something other than that. And that's why I'm not torturing people. That's why I'm not beating people, because, as this thing gets written, I want to be the good guy. I like that.
Well, one of the things that's and this is something I learned from Carl Jung too, who I was reading at the time, because he talked a lot about the encounter with the shadow, and is that it's really useful to know that you could be the villain. It's unbelievably useful to know that, because it gives you a aura That might be one way of thinking about it, that you can't get any other way. It gives you a kind of seriousness that you can't get any other way. Because, like, you know, let's say someone's pushing on you and you need to push back. It's like, well, you have to be able to push back. And the question is, well, how much would you push back? Well, if you know that you're the villain, there's almost no limit to how hard you push back. And that actually makes you what would you put? That puts you into a position where you're someone that has to be contended with. It's like that little flavor of insanity, you know, that's helpful, say, in a fight. That
like a Joe Pesci kind of crazy.
Yeah, well, look, part of the reason why those movies are so popular is exactly that. Everyone's attracted to that villainous psychopath that's unpredictable. You know, there's a heroic element to that. That's the anti-hero, obviously. But the reason there's a heroic aspect to that is because unpredictable psychopath might be more virtuous in a developmental sense than naive victim.
And much more likely to survive, and much more useful in, say, a thief, a village, or a smaller community in our past. That guy who's thinks of himself as a bit of a villain, maybe he's not very nice to his own people, but it's about what he does to the enemies, right? Like if my tribe is clashing with yours, it might not be enough that we just go and conduct warfare. We may need a villain in charge who says, no, we're going in there tonight, and we're going to cut all the throats, and we're going to take all the women, and then they'll deal on our terms.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, you need a Vlad the Impaler out there with those bodies on spikes so that the invaders don't make it all the way to your castle, in a way.
So then there's a question that arises out of that, and that's part of the question that Carl Jung was trying to answer, which is, well, given the lack of utility of naivety and weakness, and the extreme danger of malevolence, how do you balance those? And his answer to that was something like, I'll tell you something I learned recently. So there's this line in the New Testament that reads, the meek shall inherit the earth. And that's a line that's I've always stumbled over that, because I thought there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with the way that that's interpreted and translated. So when I was doing one of these recent biblical lectures, I really looked into that line, and I found the Greek word that the translation of meek was derived from, and I read a bunch about it, a bunch of different translations. And it doesn't mean meek. It doesn't mean like cringing, milksop type of meek. What it means, the real translation of that is something like, the world will be inherited by those who have weapons and know how to use them, but choose to keep them sheathed. And that is way different, man. That is way different. And so this villainy element, it's something like, men, and women know this. This is why Beauty and the Beast is a canonical female archetypal story. Men need to develop the capacity for monstrous behavior, and then master it. And that's Jungian developmental pathway in large part, because that's what the encounter with the shadow means. Like Jung said of the shadow, that the shadow in mankind's soul reaches all the way to hell, and he meant that as much as anyone can mean a statement like that. And hell is the Nazi concentration camp, or the Gulag Archipelago, and with you as the guard, and that's in you. Now it's in some of us more than others, let's say, but it's useful to know that.
It seems like the better alternative, or at least another alternative, is to empower the people situationally, right? Like I had a manager early in my career, and before he worked with me, he was a Marine, and he said that the sort of Marine you want in peacetime is different than the Marine you want in wartime, right? In wartime, those crazy guys breaking the rules and stealing the motorcycles or whatever are perfectly useful. They're fantastic. They're absolute animals that go in there and ravage the enemy. But they're a real pain in the ass in peacetime. You know?
Yeah, well, that's a problem.
Well, you know, so you have different soldiers for different times. I know a Marine's not a soldier, but, you know, and the same thing could be true, you know, in all sorts of scenarios. The person that you empower to be your leader, you know, make sure they fit the situation.
Yeah. Well, I think that's certainly the case. I think that part of the reason that what I've been saying has resonated with young men too, is that they're taught now so comprehensively to never be harmful. And it's very difficult to distinguish that from being castrated and useless. You know, and to be a tomcat that does nothing but lay on the TV and stay warm, you know. And every man knows that harmless is not heroic. It's not the same thing. And so then the question is, well, what do you do with the fact of your darkness? And the answer to that is, you don't suppress it. You don't hide from it. You don't ignore it. You master it. You integrate it.
As a man, there's almost like a measure of shame with harmlessness, where you see someone who's harmless, who's a man, and you almost have like a resentment for them of like, you're not really doing your part here.
Yeah, right.
Like you're giving me these, you know, fake smiles, pretending to be someone you're really not. So,
yeah, and he's every girl's friend, you know, and it's the standard romantic comedy trope. Is like, it's the guy who's the nice guy who's trying to be every girl's friend. He does dreadfully in the mating game, and that's partly because women, deep inside them, women know that that's a con. It's a real con, and that a man like that is only half there. And he's saying, well, why won't you sleep with me? I'm nice to you. It's like, that's the best you can bloody well muster up, is that you don't do anything offensive. God, it's pathetic, you know.
You're boring.
Well, that's
boring.
There's no adventure there. You know, and it took me a long time to realize that Beauty and the Beast was the canonical female archetype, mythological archetype, you know, is that a woman wants a man who's a tameable monster. That's what she wants. And why wouldn't she? Jesus, of course. Now, you know, it's kind of a pain in the neck to live with a monster, but it's much more of a pain in the neck to live with someone who will collapse at the first sign of calamity.
So you guys said that nice guy is boring. He lacks utility. He's useless. That's my issue with that nice guy.
Right. Exactly.
If all you can do is like say kind words and sit on the couch and watch television, you're a bum, right?
Yeah,
you know, like you need to be
you
a
mask
doer.
yourself with heartlessness.
Yeah.
He's probably like not even a funny guy because he's too afraid to step on toes.
Could we start identifying those men who clearly have penises as women? Can we just decide that now? Can we refer to them as trans women?
Not only that, I'm mandating that you refer to them as trans
I'm
women.
mandating. Like, no, ma'am. We know you're not going to get physical. Just stop getting so red-faced, ma'am. You know,
I do agree with Dr. Peterson. That seems to be a pretty safe bet, agreeing with it. But like it does seem like that resentment. And then, like, ironically, those guys who are just the, quote, nice guy to the women, eventually they come around, and I think every man has seen this with friends, they come around to resent women because they go, I'm putting all of these tokens into women and I'm not getting my sex deposit. Like, what's going on? And then
they flip spectrums. They go from the one end of the spectrum to the other. Those are the guys you see spouting like the most disgusting, like vitriol toward females online. Like every woman is this, every woman is that. When I do this, I get that. Look at what they choose instead of someone like me. It's only because of these flaws that are inherent to females. Look how flawed the female race is. Fuck them.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree. And I do see. I do think that that's most characteristic of men who do the raping orangutan routine unsuccessfully, and then they take it out on women. And I think that one of the problems with confused women is that they can't distinguish between those mean men and men with true authority and power. Because they conflate the meanness with the authority and power, and that's go ahead.
With the orangutans, the males who appear to be more like females, do the females buy into that? I guess is my clue. Do the females see these males as one of them?
No,
like, I don't
they have
know
to rape
what
them.
I don't know what their social hierarchy is like, but I imagine like big male with the leather thing on his neck. He's over there on his own doing his thing, and then up in the trees, it's like the females and the beta males. Do the females sort of see the beta males and interact with them as if they are females?
Orangutans are more solitary than other great apes. So first of all, I would say less is known about their social arrangements, but they're much less social than the bonobos and the chimps and the gorillas. So, if you're interested in that there's a great book called Demonic Males by Richard Wrangham and Peterson. I don't remember Peterson's first name, might be Chris, but it's Wrangham anyways. And it's a great book. I mean, it's a wonderful romp through primatology. And another guy that's really worth reading is Franz de Waal, who wrote, I think it's called Chimpanzee Politics, and he's looked at partly the biological basis of morality. That's one way of thinking about it.
Does he look into any of that study where prostitution quickly fell into its groove within the chimpanzees, that they taught what currency was?
I don't think that was de Waal, but his stuff is equally interesting. He's been studying chimps at the Arnhem Zoo one of the things he found, for example, was that chimp hierarchies that are run by tyrannical chimpanzees are very unstable, and the tyrannical chimpanzee tends to get torn to shreds by two of his subordinates. Right? And the more stable chimpanzee hierarchies are run by chimps who are very good at collaborative social relationships with other males, but that also pay a lot of attention to the females and the infants. And so it's so cool because he documented the instability of chimpanzee tyranny. It's really important work, man. I mean, that's a crucial.
That's fascinating.
It is.
I think we're pretty interested in great apes anyway, especially Taylor. So I am interested in that.
Taylor's interest in apes and monkeys is off the charts. I'm sorry, Kyle, carry on.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
I read that demonic book you're talking about.
Wasn't that reflected in his taste in women? Wasn't that something we were referring to much earlier?
That's Woody. That's Woody likes the hair.
No, it's Taylor. It's totally Taylor. It's not me. Taylor likes women with hair on their backs and fatty faces.
Yeah.